Hello, you delightful individuals, and welcome back to Thirst and Vanity, the home of hedonism, here on YouTube. However, today, we're not going to be talking about hedonistic endeavours. No. In fact, we're going to be talking about something specifically that is the opposite of hedonistic endeavours. The Online Safety Act. Yes. We're going to be talking about the new law in the United Kingdom called the Online Safety Act. And I'm going to be very careful about how I phrase a lot of things, because A, I don't want to be implicated in anything, and B, I'm really passionate about it. There's a lot to say. So, let's begin. We'll start with what is the Online Safety Act. For those people that might not be living in the United Kingdom, the Online Safety Act is a recent government law that has passed in the House of Lords, Commons, all that jazz, to protect the children. Now, I've always said, if someone ever says we need to protect the children, you should be very suspicious. Very suspicious. Because 99% of the time, when someone wants to protect the children, they are usually wanting something else and masquerading it as a way of protecting kids. Because who doesn't want to protect kids? Kids are innocent. They are innocent and they deserve protection. They need protection because they are vulnerable. Completely and utterly agree with that. And I don't know anybody that doesn't agree with that. You know, it's the way it should be. However, most people take that as granted. They will do everything they can to look after whatever children are in their lives. They do not need the government to step up and be like, we need to protect the children. And therefore, when somebody is trying to convince me of something and brings up the argument of we need to protect the kids, I immediately think, what are you really after? I can't begin to talk about how many people out there are protecting the kids and end up being in prison for child-related crimes. But anyway, the Online Safety Act protects children. Effectively, what it does is it stops people in the United Kingdom, everyone in the United Kingdom, from accessing adult-oriented websites without showing some kind of ID, like a driver's license or a passport, an official photo ID, or doing a facial scan to have their face scanned to confirm whether they are over the age of 18 or not. All of this has its own problems, but we'll get into that. You might think that this is an absolutely fantastic idea. You might think, my God, what a brilliant concept. Making sure that anyone who is accessing adult content like pornography, for example, is definitely going to be over the age of 18. And I could understand why you might think that. However, there are many issues with not only the act itself, not only the way that it's rolled out and actually is in play, but also some of the extended connotations of that. If you're interested in some of the deeper dives into the specific nitty-gritties of the elements of the Online Safety Act, because this is pretty much the only video I'm going to do on it, I would suggest checking out a profile called Cyber Waffle. I'll give a link in the description because I've been following their work quite well, and I find some of the things that they are saying about it and some of the ways that they're reporting very, very accurate. So if you're interested in like a quick bite-sized way of like finding out all the inner details of what's been going on with the Online Safety Act, I'll link them in the description. Honestly, fantastic, fantastic resource, in my personal opinion, from what I've seen so far. So back to the whole element of like protecting kids from adult-oriented content. One of the problems that seems to have occurred is the fact that it's not just pornography. It's not just adult-oriented content in regards to pornographic, explicit content. It's also stuff like Reddit, which is a forum, because Reddit often uses, like there are subreddits in there, there are sub-forums in there that have adult content and therefore need to cover all of the access. It's stuff like Steam for computer games. They've got a verification going on in there. It's also stuff like Wikipedia, a source of knowledge where people who want to access Wikipedia that contains some kind of adult content will have to verify their ID. Again, you might think, this is all okay. You're just confirming that adult-oriented content is only going to adults. I can understand it. I don't agree with that because I don't like lack of access and censorship, but I can see why you might think that's a good idea. The issue you might have, though, is the fact that it's also blocking certain news reports. It's stopping news articles from coming through because they're about stuff that's happening in Gaza, stuff that's happening across the world that is of a war-based nature or a genocidal-based nature, stuff that's happening that is considered adult because it's not suitable for young kids. So they are restricting the news. They are restricting information from getting to the British public unless the British public verify who they are and their ID to confirm that they are viewing that and they are over the age of 18. They're also restricting stuff like politics. There have been a variety of political commentaries, a variety of political posts and videos specifically from our House of Lords, House of Commons here in the United Kingdom that have been blocked because of the Online Safety Act. They are no longer accessible unless you verify your ID, prove who you are, and can confirm you're over the age of 18. When you get into the realms of this censorship of information, even taking out all of the elements of like the adult content, the sex work, and as you all know, I am very much a sex work advocate. Sex work is real work, and if these people want to do it, they are welcome to do it as long as it's all between consenting adults. But even taking that aside, it's censoring information to the great British public. When the government is openly saying we value free speech, they are not allowing people to speak freely about sensitive topics because they are adult content. I don't want to get too deep into the political elements of it, of control and information censorship and freedom of speech and stuff like that. There are a variety of other amazing content creators that are covering this story and being able to give that information because they'll have much more experience in those fields than I do. What I do want to talk about is what's happened, how it's rolled out, and how it straight up doesn't work and never will work. It's not going to be able to work because, in my opinion, the people that rolled it out either never expected it to work or they didn't know enough about the internet to realize how completely useless it was. To me, it kind of feels like what happened with the NHS here in the United Kingdom during the pandemic, where during the pandemic of 2020, the COVID pandemic, the government gave a shitload of money to a few of their companies, a few companies that were associated with the government, to make protective clothing for medical workers on the front lines. They gave millions and millions of pounds to these companies, and the equipment that they made didn't stand up to regulatory standards. It was useless. It wasn't able to be used in a medical facility because it wasn't to regulatory requirements, which meant all of those millions and millions of pounds were given to these companies, and all of that stuff had to be binned because it didn't live up to the standards that they needed on the front lines of the NHS. And this sort of has a similar sort of dynamic in the regards of they have given thousands, tens of thousands, perhaps even millions of pounds to tech companies to create the Online Safety Act, and it was never ever going to work. It's not fit for purpose by any stretch of the imagination. Now you may be wondering, what do you mean, Val? Surely it's fit for purpose. They'll have tested all of this stuff, and I can understand why you might think that. However, you would be wrong. For starters, there are VPNs, which is a virtual private network. And without getting into the technicality of it, what a VPN does is it transposes your IP address, which is like your computer's internet address. So if I use a VPN, it takes my IP address, my home address, and it says, hey, you're actually going from this address over here, kind of like a PO box, so that my community doesn't know where I directly live. They will send post to a PO box, and I get that post from the PO box. In exactly the same way, a VPN sends my IP address to a different place entirely. Everyone thinks I'm living in that place, and as a result, I am safe from members of the public, from malicious individuals, from parasocial individuals, from them attacking me directly and doxing me and getting into my computer directly because they don't know where I live. In regards to security, I use one, and I know a whole load of content creators and celebrity folk that use VPNs because it's a great way of keeping people at a distance. Unwanted attention, people getting my personal home IP address and finding out where I live and all that jazz. Very scary stuff, you know? Now, I want to be very, very clear for liability purposes that I do not encourage anybody to use a VPN in order to get around the Online Safety Act. Circumventing the law is still breaking the law, so please be aware of that. However, I will explain how it works for informational purposes. So a VPN, if I have a VPN here in the United Kingdom, and I say that my IP address is somewhere over in Europe, then any website that I access thinks I am from those locations. So the Online Safety Act will not apply. When I say not apply, I mean that the systems in place that enforce the Online Safety Act will not pop up. They will not be activated because I am circumventing the Online Safety Act's requirements in the regards that the Online Safety Act will only be effective against UK IP addresses. Now, there is talk about the United Kingdom banning IP addresses, but they can't do that because, from what I understand from people in the community who are very much clued up on these dynamics, the banks all use VPNs to stop people hacking into the banks. Massive corporations use VPNs to stop people from hacking into the corporations, and the government themselves, including the police and MI5 and a variety of military operations in regards to any description of cybersecurity, will also all use VPNs in order to make sure that they are extra protected against foreign adversaries, and also, if they want to have foreign intel, the best way to go about it is to have a VPN that takes you into that country. So they won't be able to ban it because A, the government uses themselves. Even if they had an exception for that, the banks that control all the money use them, and massive corporations that fund all of the different things that are going on also use them for their own security purposes. So that all feels like a complete waste of time, for starters. However, let's say they do ban VPNs, or ban VPNs for the great British public so that we are less secure in our own internet usage, but the big corporations, the banks and the government are all perfectly fine. They're okay to use VPNs. The fact of the matter is, the Online Safety Act still doesn't work because all of these companies that have adult content, whether that be pornographic content or Wikipedia or what have you, they're all based across the world, and therefore UK internet laws do not apply to them. The UK is talking about fining any internet website that has UK traffic, so anybody from the UK accessing it, £20,000 for not putting in very expensive ID, facial recognition, third-party company software. And when I say very expensive, I do mean very expensive. When I last looked, it was about £2,000 a month in order to have a third party give you facial recognition and third-party dynamics, you know? An awful lot of companies, especially smaller companies, won't have that. We are talking anything that is deemed adult. Any website that is considered to be an adult website will be affected by this and will be expected to pay a third-party company to facilitate this facial recognition, photo ID dynamic. Every sex toy shop, every burlesque company, every cabaret company, everything. Every modeling company, anything that sells lingerie, all of these different things will all be expected to have this in place. If they don't, and they're a UK company, they get fined £20,000 and still expected to put it in place. If they're not a UK company, well, a lot of the foreign companies are refusing to do it, because why should they? For example, 4chan, an internet forum, is suing the UK government over trying to infringe their American freedom of speech, because they're an American company and therefore their freedom of speech shouldn't be inhibited by UK online safety laws. You start to see where it all starts to fall apart. Firstly, very easy to get around with VPNs. Not that you should, but I'm saying that theoretically it would be possible. Secondly, many companies are just refusing to comply, because why should they? And then we get onto the ways that even ignoring those, it's still completely pointless. How'd you work that one out, Valen? Well, I'm glad you asked, Valen. Let's talk about photo IDs and facial recognition software. For starters, let's talk about the prejudice that comes with this. And when I say prejudice, I don't mean, oh no, people will have to put their own facial IDs on there and what have you. No, I'm talking about accessibility. I'm talking about anybody who has any kind of facial modification, like excessive piercings or tattoos. I'm also talking about anybody who has scars, or in some kind of accident that had some kind of facial disfigurement, or even were born with some kind of facial disfigurement, people who are disabled that affects their face in some way. All of those people are struggling to have their face recognized via the software, because the software says this isn't what a human face should look like, and therefore they are being told that they're not human. Horrifically prejudice, if you ask me, for a piece of software to dehumanize people like that because it doesn't like the way that they look. And secondly, let's talk about the other side of things, the photo ID. Now, I don't know about you, but I do not like my photo ID being on the internet. There's a very good reason for that, and that is because the dark web, where all of the illegal things happen, is rife with people selling identification. The more you upload your passport, your driver's license onto the internet, the more likely it is to be stolen and sold on to somebody who wants an illegal identification. And from what I've been told, not that I access the dark web personally, because A, I don't want to be faced with any of that shit, and B, I'm too afraid of it. But from what I've been told from people who do access the dark web, since the Online Safety Act has been put in place, the amount of IDs that have gone on sale has gone up 400%, something like that. Because some of these third parties that have been trusted with the identification of UK citizens don't seem to have the online security to back it up. So all of those people that are putting their IDs on there are subsequently having them stolen. And if you are a person that has put your ID onto a third-party company, I would strongly recommend that you contact that company and or companies and ask them all what their online security systems are, and ask them all whether they have a policy about selling on your data, because a lot of people don't read the fine print when they click agree to terms and conditions. Anyway, for all those people that don't want to do that, it turns out it's easy to get around it anyway. So many people have been bypassing the facial recognition software by uploading images from games such as Death Stranding or Horizon Forbidden West, which are very lifelike CG computer-generated images of human beings. They upload a screenshot of that instead of their face. They've managed to get around it. On top of that, there seems to be a trend for the youth at the moment where they are taking photos from government websites of their local MPs using AI to generate a fake ID and then uploading that onto porn sites and subsequently accessing all the content that they shouldn't be accessing through exploiting AI in this way. I mean, realistically speaking, there's always going to be a way around every single system, but that one's just... And finally, if that wasn't enough to prove that the entire thing is completely pointless, last Monday, I was on stream and we were talking about the Online Safety Act. And I said to people that when it first rolled out, the day that it rolled out, I got a message from a friend of mine saying, hey, the Online Safety Act has rolled out. And I did what I was always going to do, which was immediately go into Google, type in the word porn, and see how far I could get. See what the boundaries of the Online Safety Act were. Pornhub, completely blurred. Couldn't see a thing. But on that day one, it only took me 5 links. 5 listed on Google for me to find a website that didn't have any age verification on it. You just had to click that button saying I was over the age of 18. And here we are. What? A month later? Month and a half later? And I did the same thing. Live on stream. I literally went onto Google and typed the word porn. Porn. Just to see how far I could get now that it had been in place for a while. And I'm not going to lie to you, friends. 5 links. Typed in the word porn into Google. First link, Pornhub. Everything covered. Clicked open the website. The whole thing is blurred unless you verify your age through facial ID or through photo identification. Second, third, fourth link, all needed verification. However, only after I'd accessed the website. So when I went onto the website, I saw an entire menu of interesting thumbnails in full explicit detail. I could see every form, every curve, every crevice, and every speck of moisture on every single one of those adult models. And all of the adverts that were down the side that were all animated, showing all manner of intimate detail when it comes to adult work. It was only when I clicked on one of the videos to see if it would play that it popped up saying, hey, you need to verify your age. So if I were a 14-year-old boy, I could go on any one of those other 3 to access as many explicit pictures as I wanted, just not seeing the full video itself. And then finally, clicked on the 5th link, full access to whatever porn I wanted. No issues at all. Literally, clicked on it, opened it up. Are you 18? Yes. I can see whatever the hell I wanted. I did this live on stream just to see what the boundaries were now that it had been, and was the Online Safety Act put in place. 25th of July is when it officially went live. So we're literally talking a month and a half, and I can still access full pornography within 5 links. Interestingly though, what I did find fascinating was during that stream, we decided to do what I used to do as a teenager. How I would get around parental controls and stuff as a teenager. Now I'm 38 years old now, so we're talking 2.5 decades ago, but we went through the process. So I went onto Google Images and I typed in boobs, and interestingly, it would only show up images of boobs with pasties over, or medical exams of boobs and what have you. Typed in breast, and again, it would only show stuff to do related to breast cancer. Typed in art nude, it would only show painted art or drawn art of people as opposed to photographic art of nude people. Type in penis, didn't seem to have that much of an issue with that. Just feminine bodies. Penis, it would show me all the penis in the world. All the cocks I could possibly want. That actually links on to one of the major issues of the Online Safety Act, is the fact that it's actually restricting really sensitive information, like stuff to do with breast cancer, stuff to do with suicide prevention, because one of the big things that Keir Starmer said was we need to stop kids from accessing pro-suicide websites.
We've got some measures which are there to protect children, in particular from sites like suicide sites.
But in them stopping accessing pro-suicide websites, they've stopped access to all suicide websites. Just wanted to clear up, now that I'm in the editing suite, that since the recording of this, I have gone onto Google and searched some suicide prevention websites, some support for people that are contemplating suicide, and they seem to be fully accessible now. However, I am aware that it was a real problem when the first rollout of the Online Safety Act happened, because there was many people that were complaining about the fact that they couldn't access all of the support websites that they would normally access without verifying their age, which obviously, when it comes to the dark thoughts around suicide and self-harm and what have you, there's an awful lot of shame around that, which meant that they weren't able to access the help that many of them desperately needed, because that would mean they would have to have their Face ID tracked, the fact that they were having these kind of thoughts and what have you. And the more I explore what's going on with the Online Safety Act, the more I learn and the more I delve into the politics of it and where the money goes and all of the other things that I'm not going to be talking about in this wonderful little video, the more I realize how it is not fit for purpose. It does far more damage than it will ever do good. And the more I start to be more and more suspicious about the data and where that is all going. Because the government say they're not collecting our data and what we're accessing and keeping an eye on what we're up to. And yet they've also said that they're going to review the data in 6 months' time. Now, I do want to finish up with a cheeky little disclaimer. Please remember, friends, that I am not advising that anyone ever try and get around the Online Safety Act. I am, however, warning everyone to be very careful about where they put their information, where they put their face, where they put their photo ID especially, and also what they access once they've given that information over to a third-party company. Please do your research. in working out who these third-party companies are that are taking your data. And I encourage everybody, absolutely everybody, to not try and circumvent the Online Safety Act. Because as much as I disagree with it, it's still a law. And to cover my own ass, as much as I disagree with it, I cannot and will not encourage people to try and circumvent it. So yeah, a bit more of a serious one this week. But with the way that the Online Safety Act has been growing and how many people are talking about the Online Safety Act and talking about the pros, the cons, the intricate politics of it, why it's such a difficult and political and potentially even conspiracy level theory thing of people collecting data and people selling our information and what have you. I just wanted to show you and talk to you all about the fact that it just doesn't work. And it's never going to work. The only way that it could potentially have any kind of effect is if the United Kingdom decided to follow the suit of countries like Iran, Russia, China, where they change the foundational way in which we interact with the internet and restrict all forms of information unless it's been governmentally approved, which I think we can all agree is a really bad thing. We should be able to access information in whatever way we need to access information, because otherwise, how can we say that we have freedom of speech in this country? We need freedom of speech, and freedom of speech does not mean freedom of consequence, and also freedom of information. Now, many of you, I'm sure, especially if you don't know who I am, will probably be thinking, but Valen, if this isn't the way to deal with it, how would you deal with it? How would you choose to deal with protecting the children, like genuinely protecting the children, as opposed to using it as a shield to be able to do other things? And the answer is education. Educate our children into the risks of the online world. Teach them about the risks of pornography, because even though I stand with sex workers, and even though I'm very much pro-sex worker, I understand there are still issues with the porn industry. I understand that there are still problems in regards to the way that porn is portrayed. The fact that it's there for entertainment, not education, and yet so many are getting educated by it. So many young people are seeing pornography and being like, that's the way we need to do it, because they have no other point of reference. If we educated them about the risks of the internet, educated them about the risks of sharing information on the internet and also consuming information off the internet. There are literally scientific studies that have proven that good sex education helps prevent stuff like teen pregnancy, and also prevents younger people from having sex underage. And also, which is the most important thing, good sex education helps stop grooming, because young people know what to look for when older individuals are trying to groom them. There are literally scientific studies that have proven that this is the way forward, and yet so many times people are like, no, we've got to stop sex education. No, my child shouldn't be allowed to have this sex education. I don't want my kid learning about sex at their age. I also think that some of that money should also be put towards resources for parents. Stuff on the government website as to how to protect your kid. A nice, bite-sized, easy way to set up parental controls on their phone, parental controls on their tablets and laptops and computers to help parents to protect their children. It shouldn't be my responsibility to parent somebody else's kid, but it should also be a facility, a resource that is available to those parents so that they have a better chance of protecting their own kids. Education and resources. That information, that stuff would be infinitely better in these circumstances than the Online Safety Act will ever be. And I really struggle with the fact that the Online Safety Act isn't going to stop people from watching pornography. What it's going to do is it's going to push people to less moral, less ethical forms of pornography. I read somewhere that the government was singing praises that so many less people, hundreds of thousands of less people, were accessing Pornhub, but that didn't stop them from watching pornography. If you look at the statistics across the board, the amount of porn being consumed on all websites has actually gone up by about 4%. And when we're talking about billions of views a day, we're talking a lot of people that are consuming extra pornography, because as much as they can't access Pornhub, which has its problems, but also has a rigorous system to confirm that everyone on there is over the age of 18 with photo ID of all of their actors and performers that perform on there. The fact they've got consent forms to make sure not just one person, not the person that owns the actual channel on the porn site, but also everybody involved in any of those videos also has consented to being in them, making sure it's all adults and consenting adults specifically that are involved in that stuff. They also have an entire section dedicated to sex education to show people that pornography is entertainment. It should not be seen as a way to do things. And if they can't access Pornhub with its regulations, with its safety standards, with its policies in regards to making sure everyone's over the age of 18 and consenting, etc., they're going to find all of these sites that embed Pornhub videos onto their site. Sites that might not have all the rigorous regulatory standards, all of the consent forms, all of the confirmations of age. And honestly, I can see this, possibly because I know so much about the sex industry, but I can see this being infinitely more damaging to people, to viewers. Forget the porn industry at the moment, the sex industry at the moment, because it's already doing the damage to the sex industry. But in regards to the consumers and the people that actually consume this kind of content, I can see it doing infinitely more damage because of the fact that they will be consuming content from sources that aren't necessarily ethically and morally okay. So yeah, that's my big old rant about the Online Safety Act. And I hope that I have done a good job in explaining to everybody who is watching this, whether you be a part of the community, a part of my online Twitch community, or a new person that is just interested in the Online Safety Act. I hope I've done a relatively good job in explaining to you how it's never going to work. It isn't working now, and it has borderline no chance of working in the future unless the UK government decide to overhaul the entire way that the country accesses the internet. Again, I am reminded of COVID and the whole thing with the PPE that just didn't live up to standard. This feels very much like a giving money to our friends to do a patch job so that it looks like we've done something good for the kids. Again, trying to stay away from the whole dynamic of the government taking all of our information and our right to privacy. But anyway. So yeah, a bit of a heavier one this week, but I think it's an important one to talk about because as much as I love to be hedonistic and enjoying the life of pleasures, I also think it's important to talk about people that are trying to restrict those pleasures and whether they're doing it for the right reasons, whether they are actually going to succeed at it, and whether there is integrity behind it. Because I can forego some of life's pleasures if there are genuine benefits to it. Unfortunately, this isn't one of them. Don't forget, friends, I am available on other delightful platforms. If you'd like to come see me over on other platforms, like Twitch, for example, where we literally talk about this stuff, people come in and ask me questions about things, and we have entire debates, and we deep dive into things, and as previously discussed, we will literally test things there and then to find out what is going on, just for informational and educational purposes. You can also find me on TikTok, which I haven't done much on in a long time, but I am on there. And I am looking at doing more things on there because I've got projects in the plans and I need to be back on TikTok in order to do those projects. And of course, on Instagram, where you see a lot more of the behind the scenes stuff, a lot of the stuff that I do out and about in the world, some of the events and stuff that I go to, some of the delightful outfits I decide to wear. That's all on the Instagram. And yeah, thank you so much for watching. I really, really appreciate it because as much as I like to be all devil may care, happy-go-lucky, let's talk about fun things and indulge in all of the hedonism, I also want to talk about the serious things in regards to people stopping us from indulging in the things that we want to indulge in that are all safe, sane, and between consenting adults. Let's be clear about this. It means a lot to me that people actually care about this kind of thing. Next week, I'm sure I'll be back with more delightful hedonistic endeavours because that's the way I like to do things, but I really appreciate you watching through to, learn more about the complete stupidity, in my personal opinion, about this act of law that they have put in place to protect the children. I'll see you all next week. And as always, friends, remember, don't do anything I wouldn't do. Because if I wouldn't do it, I will fucking kill you.